let's kick off with Rachel Ferro, co-director of the documentary There's Your Ready Girl, who joins us from New York. Welcome, Rachel. Rachel, I have to say, what a truly inspiring film about Dr. Dorothy Cotton, someone who I didn't know about, and someone whose history and legacy in fighting against racism and enabling decades of voters in the US, and this magnificent juxtaposition of sexism and racism. What an eye-opener. So Rachel, how did this work? How did Dorothy Cotton find you?
Well, Dorothy Cotton lived in Ithaca for close to 20 years, and that's where I'm from, and that's where our production company is based. I actually never had the privilege of meeting her. I was in the same room with her one time, and I remember that vividly. But she's just a local celebrity here because of all of the work that she did that most people around the world have never heard of. And so it's really important that her story be told. And she is one of the most inspiring people I've ever encountered. And I think that comes through when you see her on the screen.
Rachel, what's the most important thing you want people to come away from seeing your work?
In terms of belonging, making this film just made it so obvious about how belonging is really at the center of what Dorothy Cotton and other people who she worked with were trying to instill in people. Because when you don't feel like you belong, when you don't feel like you have political power, there's no, it's very demoralizing. And it's Dr. Nia Nunn, who we interviewed, who had a relationship with Dorothy, said, when you talk about Black women in leadership positions and you speak of that, I already feel listened to, I already feel cared for and nurtured at a completely different level. And to me, that was the most powerful moment when we were interviewing, to just hear her say that and to know that Dorothy didn't have a mother. She didn't, you know, she pretty much raised herself, and she didn't have any kids, but she was this person who wanted to see other people propelled forward. And so she knew about nurturing, and it was just this very natural thing that she did to hold people up, to, you know, in the cover of teaching people how to read and write so that they could pass the literacy test that people were being made to take in order to vote, which was basically limiting voting rights for Black people. She was recruiting tens of thousands of people to join the civil rights movement and to really feel that they had power and that they did belong and that actually this was their country. And so I have chills now because that was where we were, and it's still where we are. And it's just, it's an overwhelming reality, but it's true. There's so much that still needs to be done. There was so much accomplished then, and we've got such a long, long way to go.
Oh, lovely, lovely words. Thank you, Rachel. Rachel, well done, and thank you so much.
Thank you.
Jerry is from the Leeds Animation Workshop with the film Lockdown in West Leeds, who joins us from, you guessed it, Leeds. Welcome, Terry. And please tell us about the Bramley elderly animators and their compelling representations of lockdown.
Well, Bramley is an old industrial area of Leeds. It's not a very wealthy area, but it's got a lot of community activity there. And this group, Bramley Elderly Action, before the pandemic, we agreed with them that, as the animation workshop, that we would go and do some animation workshops with them in their community centre. But then the epidemic struck, and as elderly people, they obviously weren't allowed to go out. And so they were even more isolated than they would have been otherwise. And our collective is, there were 3 of us under 30, 2 of us over 50, including one of us over 70. And we thought we'd go ahead with this anyway, because they were going to be even more isolated. We wanted to try and do some cultural activity with them. And beforehand we were so nervous, thinking, have they got computers? How is this going to work? You know, we didn't even know if they were going to be able to get online to interact with us. But yeah, we made some animation kits, little bags full of felt tips and plasticine and things, and and got them delivered. There was a running group in Bramley that was volunteering on their runs to do deliveries locally. They call themselves Bramazon instead of Amazon. and they took these little packs of creativity kits to all the elderly animators who were volunteering for our workshops. And so they all had something to make with. And rather painfully at first, we all managed to get onto Zoom. And they all absolutely rose to the challenge. They were so brilliant. It was a delight to work with them, and some very firm friendships were made. And I'm glad to say that since we finished the workshops with them, they formed their own art club. And so that is a real result, I think.
These kits are quite amazing. So maybe walk us through a little bit of how you've made animators with all of these amazing materials that I don't think anyone anticipated.
By the end of the third session we had with them, you know, some people have managed to download animation apps onto their devices. They were transferring files to us. That by the end of the 7th workshop, some people have managed to do audio recordings. And yeah, so it was a learning process in terms of the technology as well as in terms of the animation. Well, probably more actually of the digital technology than the animation. But we took every scrap of everything that was created during the workshops and sort of glued it all together to make that little film. We were having very regular meetings together, and very soon we realized that the first thing we needed to do in our production meetings was just to say to each other, how are you? You know, how has your week been? It wasn't just an ordinary production meeting through all that process. It was actually real connection meeting. And I think that meant a lot to all of us, you know, the young ones and the old ones. So, yeah.
Oh, beautiful. Well, thank you. Thank you so much. Really, really enjoyed that. Anne-Marie, you're our next guest. And Anne-Marie's joining us from Ireland. And she wrote and directed a very compelling drama, powerful film and somber story. My first question is, how did this story find you, or how did you find it?
Yeah, well, it was a story that came from a late night interview on radio where a mother of a man who had been murdered was talking about having to go to the trial of the man who had murdered her son. And she was talking about her grief at having to go and day after day sit in the same seat while she heard about what had happened to her son. And then throughout the trial, on one day she noticed the other woman, if you like, who was sitting in her other seat. And it was the mother of the man who was accused of killing her son. And she had been so entrenched in her own grief that she thought there was nothing that could possibly be worse. And then she thought, actually, you know, that's worse. Her grief is more visceral than mine. And it was a thought that just stuck with me, because I thought, how would you cope if you know, someone you loved and reared and nurtured did something, you know, that took the life of another person? So that's where the genesis of the film was, and we just kept it very simple, and we just explored that love, that breaking of that love. So it was lovely looking through the lens that you brought to the talk today, to just look at it through a new lens of belonging. And I thought, that really encapsulates the film, because it's all about belonging. And we see her, and you know, we get this picture of how they belonged very much as part of a community. And then we see the damage he's done to that, and how she now is alone and looking out at this community that she's no longer free to be part of because of what he's done. And yet how he still belongs to her at the end, like he's still coming home no matter what he's done. So I thought it was a very fitting new lens, if you like.
Very, very powerful. And what have audiences said to you? How have they reacted to it?
Most people found it quite upsetting. It is, it's quite relentless in its grieving that it brings, and I think it kind of carries us along into her grief. It has got a very positive, warm response because I think it moves people emotionally. It won Best Actor at Disappear Here Film Festival. That was its maiden voyage, if you like. So it inspired us to keep it going. So it has met, I suppose, with parents, and particularly parents of teenagers, you know, who have had that lovely experience of you know, bringing a child up and then going through those horror years where, you know, they almost turn on you and you become their enemy. But people who've made that transition and got them to adulthood without too much damage along the way, and they, you know, they really empathize with that. My God, could you imagine something like that happening? So it's warmly received, but people generally don't go back for a second look because it is relentless. You know, it's not an easy watch. Yeah.
Anne-Marie, thank you so much. And
thank you very much. I'm really delighted to have the film show it to you. Thank you.
Excellent, excellent. All right, well, our next filmmaker, Stavroula, is triple writer, director, and producer of the documentary Athens, My City, My Hood, and joins us from, you guessed it, Athens, Greece. And welcome, Stavroula. What a remarkable and rich tapestry of personalities and experiences you have found. Stavroula, I'd love you to tell us, how did you find your narrators / storytellers and to pull all this together?
For me, the idea came from traveling and doing other documentaries, and then coming home and being stuck in Athens, as I put it, and then having all this downtime because of the pandemic, and then starting to see the city in ways I've never seen it before. And I picked my 5 people because they were the example of what Athens is right now. And I think not just Athens, but I think every city in the world right now. You can't say it's this, and these are the main inhabitants of the city. This is the voice of the city. But specifically for Athens, because when we think of Athens, we think of the Parthenon, we think of Souvlakia, we think of, you know, Zorba the Greek. We don't really see Athens as a city that is very multicultural and has challenges, real challenges, social, political, economic challenges, as we know, and cultural challenges. It's changing. So when I met with all of them, and then finally we were able to get out of lockdown, actually meeting them, they were magnificent human beings, just and eager to tell their story. And the one thing they all had in common was that they loved their city, and they considered themselves Greek or adopted Greek. So I loved that about them.
How was making this during the pandemic, trying to bring it all together, obviously different from some of your previous experiences, and will it change how you work going forward?
Yes, yes. First of all, to answer your first question, I loved the challenge, because I think sometimes when we get into the rhythm of making a film and you do one after the other, or, you know, there's just a rhythm that you get into, I think you lose that sort of spark sometimes, and it becomes, you can become complacent. You know what the process is under these circumstances. There was no formula. You had to get out there and do it. There were many challenges with the masks, and we didn't know from one day to the next if we were going to have another lockdown or not. So, and that taught me, or it reminded me again of the excitement of capturing a story, the excitement of not knowing what it's going to be, but having an idea and then saying, okay, let's throw it up in the air and see if we got it. I wanted to capture when somebody calls themselves a Greek and they don't look like what a Greek, stereotypical Greek looks like. And when they live in a world that says to them, when they walk among the streets of their neighborhoods, their city, and they are stopped by police or by strangers, and they're asked in a conversation, where are you from? And when, as one of our main characters, who's Afro-Greek, said, in answer to that question is, I am Greek. I belong here as much as you do. So that sense of belonging, when do we stop being the outsider and start embracing and being embraced within this culture? So that's what I want people to start seeing, that we are not the others, we are the ones who are uniting. So
thank you so much. It really was an enchanting transport to a city I very much love too, but also now see with new eyes. So huge congratulations with that.
thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be part of this. Thank you. And
Thank you. Thank you. All right, our next filmmaking team is the dynamic duo of Anne Beresford, who's the producer, and Morgane Polanski, director of Through the Looking Glass. The characters, I don't want to give it away, with the characters and the people in this film, where were they and where are they now?
I'll start, and I'm sure Morgane will join in. She and I were just talking earlier on actually about this theme of belonging. And in the film, there is an older woman and a younger woman. And that sense of being comfortable in your own body. You know, one of the lines that Morgane came up with earlier on was, if I could write a letter to my younger self, what would I say? And so that's definitely one of the themes about belonging in your own body, feeling comfortable in your own skin, and how I think we are all very adept at finding ways to criticize ourselves, or that fine line between, if you like, ambition and self-criticism.
I heard once by an older woman who said to me, it's a pity youth is lived by young people. And it got me thinking, you know, I don't know, I'm in now more towards my late 20s, but even towards my mid 20s, me and all my girlfriends around me were kind of like just, yeah, really critical and struggling with ourselves, finding ourselves. And I was thinking, I'm like, you know, this should be my peak time. It's only going to get worse from then on. And you know, I was speaking to other, yeah, older people, and they said, oh, I never realized what I had, and now I look at photos and I'm like, damn, and I'm like, is this just the cycle of life? Because I'm like, I can't wait to get old. I can't wait to just like, and my mom's like, aging is, you know, is really difficult, and I'm like, oh no, I can't wait. And I'm like, maybe I will tell this to my own daughter, you know. So yeah, it just got me thinking, you know, what would I say to my younger self?
Where did the idea come from, both as a story and then how to film it?
The idea came from, so Serena Jennings, who is the young woman in it, wrote it, and it was her idea. And she just, I remember, came up to me on one day and said, I have an idea for a short film. We worked before on things, and we have a production company together. And yeah, so she came up with the idea, and then we kind of fantasized about it, and just I don't know, I also thought of like a modern my favorite Disney was a Snow White, and I don't know, I thought of like a modern Snow White as well. And yeah, and it just got me thinking as well, a lot of, you know, especially during the pandemic, people in care homes that are just, you know, left there. So yeah, it was all a mixture of things.
I'd just like to pick up on what Anne-Marie said, and although I think our films are probably very different, I think a lot of what she said certainly chimes and holds true for us, which is the ultimate place you have to belong is in your own skin and in your own soul or in your own mind. We are all our own harshest critics. As Morgane said, there are two central characters. There's the younger woman who is played by Serena, who's also the writer. And the older woman is played by Sian Phillips, an actress of obviously enormous experience and renown, and who spends the entire film in bed, really. So we filmed on location. We benefited hugely from what that location gave us, because that sense of space, of the idea of this woman existing in her bedroom, and how we all acquire bits and pieces that represent our life and can't bear to throw away that empty perfume bottle, or we have to have that picture on the wall even though we don't even like it anymore. So the location filming was a really, really important part of this, as was absolutely the hair and makeup and wardrobe, and we were incredibly supported by our collaborators on that front, because the look of the film is very, very important, as well as cinematographer Alfie Biddle, whom Morgane had worked with before.
I must ask you, where did you find those dresses and her dressing gown? And wow, you must have had some real fans out there.
Well, we're really lucky to have such an incredible, talented team on board and all across the board. We had an amazing costume designer, Jeffrey, and we had Dior, Maria Grazia from Dior, who custom made the two outfits that the younger Violet wears. So I really wanted to mix this sort of, essentially she's bedridden, with a sort of like kind of fantasy fashion side to it as well. And I don't know, it just also the fact that there's perfume bottle, the looking glass, this matters so much, the makeup being all made up, but yet you can't move out of your bed, that has such importance, just made me I just find that quite fascinating, how when stuff is bad, we need to focus on tiny things that we can control or think we can control. Illusion.
It was a film that certainly hair and makeup and the costume designer Jeffrey Michael really enjoyed doing. There's a lot of peach pink fluffy negligees, and again collaborating with Dior, as Morgane said, what great collaborators to be working with.
Well, again, thank you, and huge congratulations, because I think it's a very successful piece, and it must have been great fun with such a strong team. So thank you both. We're on now to another dynamic duo representing the drama, and I have to say this is really a refreshing romp of a comedy. It's called Man at the Bottom of the Garden, and with us from that project today we have Karen Newman, who's the producer, and Paul Blinkhorn, who's the writer and director. It's a great punt on human nature, marriage, and family. So where did the inspiration for this story come from?
It came from a few places. I married quite early. I've been with my wife for 20 years. So maybe I was looking into the future, possibly. But also, I've got most of my friends are a hell of a lot older than me. And I'd heard stories about kind of people hitting retirement as well, and kind of how relationships changed when people had spent a lot of time together. And most of the time they'd be at work, but now all of a sudden they find themselves under each other's feet, but yet they still love each other. And how do they adapt to that after 40 years of it being one way or the other? So yeah, that's kind of, and I wanted it to be a comedy because they do love each other, but they're rubbing each other up the wrong way.
Mm-hmm. And Karen, from you as the producer, but no one is only just a producer. Give us your take on the story development, the storyline, and the characters in it, and some of the ingenuity and thinking that must have gone into that.
Well, Paul sent me the script, and I was on my 1 hour of exercise walking the dog, and I sat down and read it on my phone, and it just made me laugh and smile. And I thought, my God, we're all going through our own personal hell. we all relate to the situations that happen within the film, and he's put such a comic take on it. I just thought we have to get it out there now. People need to smile, and as Paul was saying, it's a family. It's a mother, father, and it's their daughter, and they're obviously a close family. And we were very lucky with the actors that we got, because they'd never met each other. First time they met was on Zoom, and we had our production meeting, and they all just got on so well, and it was just the most incredible family dynamic. They were even teasing each other, just offset, if you like. It was all shot on Zoom, so you can't really say offset, but they had that kind of camaraderie and banter. And Claire Calbraith, who plays the daughter, was absolutely brilliant. She's like the straight woman for their kind of double comedy act, and keeps it all together beautifully. And there's some classic lines in there. I mean, the mother gets all dressed up at one point in an evening gown, and she's there with her glass of wine, and the daughter's like, "What are you doing, mum? There's literally nowhere to go." And she's like, "Well, so what?" And it's that kind of, it's how we were all dealing with what we were going through, and how a family can change and still operate. And then they needed time apart, so they engineered ways separately to be apart, and that's all part of the humour and obviously toilet paper features heavily, because hey, we all experience that.
And congratulations, bravo, thank you everybody. Really enjoyed meeting you, and thank you for your beautiful works and your contributions.